Senate author of the Right to Work bill, Dave Thompson, joins me now to talk a little bit about his legislation. Thank you for joining us today.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me.
Let's begin with your legislation. And what was the impetus for even introducing the bill?
Well, the impetus is that, as everybody knows, the first thing we need to do right now to get the state and the nation, for that matter, back on track is to try to create jobs through increased economic activity. And states, the 22 states that have had employee freedom / right to work in place for years, have increased their labor force and their family household income at a faster rate than those states that have not been right to work. And so, in my view, it is a jobs bill.
And as you look at those other states, does your legislation mirror what they have done?
You know, I haven't looked at all of them, and we didn't pick one particular state to use as a prototype. For one thing, we're doing it as a constitutional amendment. Some states, like for example in Indiana, Governor Mitch Daniels just signed it into law here a few days ago. And so we kind of tried to figure out what fit well with the constitutional requirements here in Minnesota and what we wanted to accomplish. And you'd probably see bits and pieces from numerous jurisdictions, I would assume.
Senator, the critics do call this a right to work for less bill. Does that argument have any teeth in your opinion?
Well, no, I don't think so, because as I indicated, the data show that actually household income rises faster. Now, what they will tell you is that if you look at the states that have employee freedom, right to work, that they have lower levels of income. Well, two things. Number one, that's a static view. It's looking at where are they today, not where have they been and where are they going. And then secondly, you also have to factor in cost of living in those states. Well, but when you look at it overall, you have to look at where is your economy going. And clearly the states that have employee freedom, right to work in place are growing faster than states that don't.
Well, taking it a bit further though, Senator Ken Keilash did state in a news conference that in his experience in Idaho, wages either stagnate, freeze, or go south once a right-to-work bill is enacted, and that was the case in Idaho. And he backed it up with a story about a carpenter friend who ended up moving to Minnesota to make a decent wage. So how would you counter that argument when he's giving an example?
Well, I would imagine that no matter what you do in the economy, there is an example of somebody who doesn't do as well, as I'm sure there's obviously an example of someone who does better. So certainly we would never try to say that anything we do economically benefits all people the same or benefits all people in the short run. What you have to look at is what happens with the overall economy. Overall, household incomes grow and people prosper better.
And as we said, this is a constitutional amendment. So if this passes, if voters do approve it, how do you envision the implementation and the protection of those who opt to go union and those who opt not to?
Well, the implementation will be quite simple. Once it becomes law in this state through the Constitution, then any person who goes to work for a place with a collective bargaining agreement will simply have a choice as to whether or not to join the union. And that really is all that's going on here. It's important for the citizens to understand this does not address collective bargaining, does not address union organization or dues paying, whatever. Now, your second question was, how do you balance between those who choose to be in the union and those who don't? Well, my hope is that just like North Dakota, for example, they're having a dispute between the sugar beet growers and the people that work in the plants. North Dakota is an employee freedom right to work state, and yet almost all of those employees belong to the union. I'm guessing that's because the union is responsive and does a good job for its customers, and a union's customers, after all, are the union members. So my hope is that it benefits everybody, that union members now have leverage to make their union be more accountable and responsible to them. And if that doesn't happen, then they don't have to continue to pay dues.
Are there any concerns about whistleblower protection or enforcement of protection?
I don't think so. I'm unaware of any significant problems along those lines in the other states. And as I indicated, there are 22 states in this nation that have had right to work in place for quite some time. And it shouldn't change the general employment laws overall, no.
Okay, Senator, I want to shift real quickly and just talk a little bit more about the broader issue of constitutional amendments. And the bigger question that is coming up considerably in the media is whether or not legislating through constitutional amendments is a good idea. And what's your opinion on this?
Well, first off, I find it interesting that there seems to be this kind of storyline that we're doing all of these constitutional amendments. First off, there's only one that's been put on the ballot so far, and there's only a couple of more that are being talked about seriously. If you look at history, since 1972, when, by the way, the Democrats have been in control of the Senate. All that time, there have been 31 constitutional amendments. So that's about 1.5 per election. And in 1980, we had the maximum number that we've ever had, which was 5. So there seems to be this, the Republicans are legislating through constitutional amendment. The fact is, we aren't doing anything that's unprecedented in the state. That being said, it should not be used as a place to do things that should legitimately be done through the legislation process with the governor signing the legislation. It's true that shouldn't be done, but let's take employee freedom for an example. To me, a constitution should first and foremost set up the basic structure of government and protect fundamental liberties. What can be more fundamental to your economic liberty than your ability to choose to go to work for someone without having to pay what basically amounts to a job tax, where every paycheck you have an amount extracted from your paycheck that goes to a third party in order for you to have the right to that job? That strikes me as something that should be fundamentally dealt with in the Constitution.
Historically, voter turnout tends to be higher when there are constitutional amendments on the ballot. Is that the hope this year as well?
I have no idea. I imagine that a lot of people will be motivated to get out, but I think when you have a presidential election, and of course in this state, one of our United States senators is up for re-election, and of course there'll be a fight to try to maintain control of the legislature on our side. The DFL, of course, will try to flip the tables. I don't think there'll be any shortage of turnout given constitutional amendments or not.
All right, Senator, thanks for your time today. We certainly appreciate it.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me.